Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Season 3 of the People in Fundraising podcast. This is a platform to give nonprofit professionals an opportunity to share who they are professionally and their joys, the challenges, the opportunities for continued growth that they have in a field that they flourish in. And this morning, I'm really excited to welcome Jessica Muñoz-Sainz, who is joining us from Massachusetts. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Before Jessica introduces herself by title and such, I just want to say thank you to our mutual connection, Jessica McNeill, who was a Season 1 guest. Jessica connected me with Jessica today as a guest, and I'm really delighted to hear about your experience. So please tell us a bit about who you are by title and institution.
So I am currently an assistant director with the HKS Fund at the Harvard Kennedy School for Government and Public Policy, a bit of a mouthful, as I think titles in development always tend to be.
Yes.
I joined the Kennedy School 2 years ago, originally from California. And it has definitely been, I think, a whirlwind. I feel like I've learned a lot. Harvard's a great institution and to be in, and especially the Kennedy School, it's been amazing to be in a place and meeting so many students and alums who are coming from all walks of life, who are trying to do just like public good. So it's really cool to be here.
That's so great. Before we started recording, Jessica, you mentioned very briefly you just got back from a trip to London.
Yeah, so talk about great opportunities. I was, afforded the opportunity to travel for work to London for the first time. It was my first time in the UK. It was such an amazing trip, a week long. Left Monday, returned Sunday. It was a week filled with really amazing meetings. We had a really amazing alumni event. It was just fantastic.
Oh, so cool. I'm glad to hear that. So what we do at this point, Jessica, is have guests first tell our audience how they entered the fundraising profession. And if I could tee that up a little bit before you get to respond. I'm a prospect research person and go on LinkedIn quite a bit. And in preparing the slate of questions for today for you, your academic background is super interesting to me. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, how you sought out those varied degrees and academic pursuits, and then how you went into nonprofit from there, please.
Yeah, well, it's always kind of a little bit of a long story, and I don't think that's always that interesting, but people always think it's really funny. So I don't know, I feel like I always have to go kind of back to the beginning.
Sure.
And, I always when people ask me this question, I always tie my family in a little bit too, just because it kind of gives that background. But I'm one of 10 children. So I have 4 sisters and 5 brothers, and first generation daughter of parents from Mexico, first one in my family to really go to school. And I think, and this is kind of sometimes tied into some other subjects, but there's always kind of a pressure when you're the first one in your family to go to school to try and pursue a career in something like being like doctor or lawyer. Like in Hispanic families, that's the dream of every, I think, Hispanic parent is, or just every parent in general, is to have a child who becomes a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so when I first did community college for 2 years to really figure out what I wanted to do. And so I really took that opportunity to take as many different classes as possible. I was taking classes in history, which I really loved. Like I was always drawn to history, and I was taking classes, statistics. But I took this really amazing anthropology class
Mm,
where that was the first kind of time I'd sort of seen a melding of a lot of different like fields, taking like look at history, but also the evolutionary aspect was really interesting to me. And
yeah.
like I said, I can a little ramble a little bit when I get started on talking about this, but I remember for one of the exams that we had to do, the professor set out like bones, or at least casts of bones.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were from different hominin species. And we
Mm.
kind of had to sort of try and identify certain traits on these bones. So it was really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of was my first sort of venture into the
Mm.
anthropology field. And when I went on to do my undergraduate, I was still of the mind that I wanted to do medical school. By then I decided I was like, oh, the medical field would probably be a good thing given my sort of interest in bones, biology, evolution,
Sure.
all that stuff.
Yes.
So I was pre-med track. And then I had to take, those dreaded organic
No.
chemistry classes. It was not for me. It was the first time that I really struggled with a subject.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, pivot, maybe law school. But just to stand out and have some sort of a different like background, I wanted to still stick with the anthropology focus, but more of a focus on sort of like I took a class on osteology, so
Oh,
paleopathology. So kind of looking at stuff like trying to think of like a career with sort of the still science background, but while still then getting a degree in criminal justice as well, and
okay.
then pursuing possibly law school in the future. So
Yeah.
again, I was a little bit all over the place.
But there are links between all of those disciplines.
Yes, very much. This looks it's so interesting to see how many fields are so interconnected.
Yeah.
And so again, all over the place. But then I really started falling in love with maybe more the forensic side of stuff. And I was like, law
Oh.
school, that's probably not going to be for me. So I really started to just focus in on like how to meld the criminal justice stuff with the like anthropology
Hmm.
background. And then I discovered that forensic anthropology was a thing. So that was
Oh,
kind of the track that I was on.
yeah.
When I was graduating, I was like, okay, I gotta go do a master's degree. And I applied actually at BU and NYU,
Okay.
got waitlisted, didn't get in. Um, but as a backup school, I had applied to a school in Indiana. And it was the University of Indianapolis. Best time of my life, having never been to the Midwest
Oh, uh-huh.
at all. One of my professors had advised me to apply there. So I applied, got in, moved there 2 days before classes started, and
Wow.
sort of stayed on that bioarchaeology. The program there was for bioarchaeology. So it wasn't
Okay.
necessarily for forensic anthropology, but there was still a way to move into that in the future. When
Hmm.
I thought about pursuing my PhD, but bioarchaeology focuses basically on the same things that forensic anthropology does, but with
Okay.
the sort of more historical viewpoint rather
Hmm.
than the sort of more modern. Does that make sense? I don't know if that
Sure.
it's kind of like nuanced
Uh,
sometimes on the differences
yeah.
between.
I read something
But
recently about like the Denisovans. Is that a term you're familiar with? Like it was a subset of like Homo sapiens or something, like way back in time.
yeah, well, there's actually a lot of different what are referred to as like hominin species, and they
That's
keep
it.
sort of coming. Yes, they keep coming up with obviously now they don't come new names for the different evidence they keep finding. It's like every time they think they have found the link, the
Yes.
last link, there's something new that's found, and so um it, it's really fascinating because there's like people who dedicate literally their focus of research is on building phylogenies, where it's like you
Mhm.
start to really trace the evolution of the Homo sapien back through all of those hominin species. And you
Yeah.
have things like Homo habilis is the first hominin who's recognized for tool usage. And so that's actually, they call them the handyman.
Oh.
I believe it's Australopithecus afarensis, who it might be Australopithecus afarensis, who you first start to see the trait of bipedalism. And so we look at,
Oh.
but like there's so much you can learn from bones. It's like kind of fascinating. Again, I could go on about this forever. But yes, so that's kind of, I was knee deep and just loved the field, loved the research.
Yeah.
And now why I'm a fundraiser. So all the while I was in school, I worked for, at first in my undergraduate, I was like, I need a campus job.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
and so I think as many as people in this field do and how they find themselves in this career path, I needed a campus job. There wasn't that much available at the time on my campus when I was looking, other than the being a student fundraiser, phonathon caller.
Oh, yeah.
I did the interview just because I was like, I guess I might as well. I was very shy. Like, I felt like it was very hard for me to like talk to people. I was like, are you like, am I really gonna like cold call people in the middle of the night? Well, obviously there's more to it than that, but you know, at the forefront of my mind, that's what it was. And so yes, so oddly enough, they hired me for whatever reason. And I remember the first times I sat down at that desk to like to do one of those phone calls, I was like, God, don't answer, don't pick up the phone.
Sure.
Like,
Yes.
I'm sure like a lot of, I think, fundraising experience that. But over time, as I started to talk to people, and just like hearing people's life stories and just it was all just so amazing. Like I remember this one conversation that like made me cry, like in a good way.
Yeah.
When she was telling me her life story. And so it just like became really fascinating. I feel like as someone who came from a place where not a lot of people didn't really go to college, like didn't really come from sort of really big educational backgrounds or like things like that, or who
Sure.
had like solid careers. I started to learn so much from all these folks that I was talking to. I got really great advice, and just made some really great connections. And I
Yeah.
started to learn about philanthropy and what it meant. I was a scholarship student. I had no concept of where scholarships came from. I knew the term scholarship, but I didn't realize,
Yeah.
like, you know. So anyways, although I was in school, I did that. Move forward to graduate school, same thing. I was like, I want a campus job.
Yeah.
And they happened to be hiring a grad assistant. I had done, under my undergrad, I was a student caller. Then I became the student supervisor. And
Okay.
that was really cool. At the time, my undergraduate SF State, we worked for the school, but we were managed by Ruffalo No Levitts. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
They're R&L. They're a company that does a lot of the phonathon sort of software and all of that for a lot of higher ed institutions. I went through their supervisor training, so that was like a really great sort of training to have under my belt.
Yeah.
Went to graduate school. And then there, I wasn't just a caller. I was sort of in charge of the recruitment, the training, the managing of a whole team of students.
Yeah.
And so
awesome.
Yeah, and stop me if I'm going on too long.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, so I was doing that, going to school, really sort of, I noticed that I was spending a lot more time in the office. Like my director would be like, I can't pay you for all these hours. I'm like, it's fine. I love being here.
Okay. That's cool.
I started spending so much time there and I fell in love with the work really more than anything. It resonated on a lot of different personal levels for me. And again, just having the opportunity to learn from so many people. And when it came to graduation time from graduate school, it was like, all right, deciding factor. Like, I did this, I got my master's degree in bioarcheology and I love the field. But like, what next? Go get the PhD or stay in academia or sort of figure that out. And my director at the time thought I should apply for an internship with CASE. Yes.
Yeah.
So I did the internship with CASE and I was placed at Johns Hopkins. So again, I kind of felt like I kept getting all of these really great doors opening for me,
Sure.
like sticking on this career path. I had the opportunity to be at Johns Hopkins, and they're amazing at what they do. I was with the team at the Sheridan Libraries, and I've learned so much in just the 2 months that I was there. It's so hard to describe because, again, I feel like it was just such an awesome time. And then I was like, okay, I kind of like this.
Sure.
And so I moved back to California, and I was like, all right, need a job again. So I really, I had been doing the like annual giving stuff for a little while. So I applied to be the assistant director for the Cal CLA fund there.
Okay.
And same thing, I got to recruit and manage and train students. And I can say it was the best like thing about that job. Like
Oh,
I worked
awesome.
with so many students who, yeah, came from my community, who were first generation, who'd never had jobs before. And I kind of felt like I got to the opportunity to be a mentor to them in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I still keep in touch with them. Actually, when I first moved here, a couple of them came and visited. And
Oh,
so
nice.
um, it was the best part about that job. So sorry, it went on for a little.
No, that's fine.
But that's kind of the how I was studying all of that, and kind of how it's pulled in this direction.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there definitely are, synergies between, the study, the discipline of, human behavior and how they developed what made people tick, and you can apply that interest to at least to frontline work and prospect research and lots of other disciplines within fundraising too. That natural curiosity. Um, Also, I think it was great that you were able to manage a team in graduate school at the Phonathon.
Yeah.
Having that experience of managing early on must have been beneficial as well.
I mean, I definitely think it was. I think it benefits me both in the sense, like future wise, should I ever have the opportunity to manage a team? Like, I think I learned so much from them, especially from, they're so young, and kind of that's
Sure.
when they're first sort of starting to be molded into being professionals. And
Yeah.
I think, and I have so many conversations with them now, and they talk about just how great it was to have me as a manager, because it feels like it helps them navigate those relationships that they had. And sort of having that opportunity to sort of have constructive criticism from me, but also having them give that to me. So
Yeah.
I tried my best to sort of build all these like systems in place where we had this really cohesive relationship, and I feel like it's helped me on my side, now in how I report to managers and how sort of navigating those relationships. But yeah, no, it was an amazing experience for sure.
So cool. My light just went off, so give me 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. Thanks for
No
your
worries.
patience.
No, yeah.
Jessica, you just mentioned, being able to manage and mentor young people, both at the Phonathon and then when you're working in California. Um, Most of my guests have been kind of mid-career. They've worked in nonprofits for 15, 20 years
Mhm.
when they're on as a guest. And for you, I regard you as, a young nonprofit professional. And I think that is a great benefit to articulate here in the program. That's one reason why I wanted to have you on,
Mhm.
because I think younger professionals bring certainly energy and a fresh way of looking at things, whether it's, the processes, why we do things the way we do in fundraising, and in social impact work that, people like me may not consider, or they take it for granted, or may not even critically examine. So as you got this question ahead of time, I would love to know, are there examples that come to your mind with um, that perspective that you have where you are in your career
Mhm.
about reevaluating processes, certainly mindsets, and welcoming and embracing the lived experience and viewpoints from people from all walks of life and diverse backgrounds.
Yeah, that was a kind of a tough question. I felt it's kind of funny. I sometimes feel like I'm of the like when people are like, "Oh, you're so young." I'm like, I'm old. I have an old. But people always tell me I have an old soul. But no, I mean, it's interesting, and I tried to think about this a lot. And again, I don't know necessarily that I have very super insightful things to say about this, but I think in fundraising, as you know, it's sometimes, and maybe in other jobs as well, but it's always like it's not broken. Why change things? And we oftentimes, at least from my experience having been at a public university like Cal State LA, that's very small, and it's part of like the bigger Cal State LA, the Cal State system, but it's still sort of each of the schools receives funding from the state, but also they have to do their own fundraising as well.
Yeah.
And coming from a school like that, I mean, part of the reason why I also wanted to take this job now at Harvard was just to see what it was like on the flip side of being at a very big institution, powerhouse place, all of that. But it's interesting because when I compare my experience to there, to here, and at Johns Hopkins, it does seem like more often than not, there's almost we take a one size fits all approach.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
And
yeah.
Or like even when you go to conferences and you're doing all of these sessions on, what's working for this school, what's working for all of it. It's always the best practices, and there always tends to be a lot of similarity in a lot of places. Not to say that necessarily that's a bad thing, and it works for a lot of places, and there's a lot of growth within that as well. But I think but I think now you see times are changing.
Right. Yes.
In policy and government and you look at the culture of younger people now and the way that they see, if they know about the culture of philanthropy and like their understanding of it is like different than it was before.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, stop me if I'm rambling, but
no, that makes sense.
I can say, at least from my own personal experience, again, I didn't know about philanthropy. I didn't have any sort of concept of what it was. And that can often be the case in a lot of communities of people of color. But then again, also taking into consideration age and sort of how they understand social impact. I think for younger folks, when they think about how can they have the biggest impact, their immediate thing isn't necessarily to give. It's more to let me go protest, let me go volunteer, but which are in their own sense a philanthropic act, because philanthropy is more than giving. It's again using your skills, your time, all of those, and applying those to a cause. But
absolutely.
I don't know if necessarily where I'm going with this, but
no, that's a great point. I think it's a multifaceted endeavor. It doesn't have to be strictly, a transactional, I give you money because you reached out to me, or I'm an alum, or I was treated at a healthcare facility. There are lots of ways to.
Yeah. And so I think it's sort of really, and I know a lot of institutions take a deep dive into their demographics and they try to understand some of those things. But I think it's like you do the analytics, but then it sort of kind of just flows into the same. You stick with what seems to work, and it's sort of, and it's hard to say, and I definitely don't have the solution as to how you can start to really use that information. But it really is sort of really starting to really take a good look at saying times are changing, younger folk and the way they see giving. I mean, you see this now in phonathons. The phonathons have pretty much been going away in my experience from what because younger folks don't want to really jump on a phone and have a phone call. If that makes any sense. So, and I don't know necessarily again that I have a lot of insightful things to say with regard to this, but I think that there's, I don't know. Do you have another question? Maybe that'll help me.
Well, I know. Speaking of phonathon, in my day job, I'm at Weber State University, which is north of Salt Lake City.
Mhm.
And we had a phone-a-thon for many years, and this past fiscal year, the current fiscal year, FY24, we decided not to continue it for the
Mhm.
reasons largely that you just articulated, like, younger alumni, prospects, donors, they have different comfort levels and different ways that they want to be communicated with. And I
Yeah.
think phone-a-thon felt maybe a little more intrusive for the rising generation.
Yeah, and I know that there was a push for a lot of institutions. Sorry to interrupt you, but I know that there was a push for a lot of institutions to try and pivot and adapt to those feelings by going through the texting way.
Yes.
But then that obviously presented a lot of difficulties, not just with like carriers, but also just in the sense, is that even more intrusive to text someone? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is really fascinating, but again, just kind of I think there is a need to sort of pivot. Like I don't have necessarily examples, but we do need to start really taking more into consideration like where the people are coming from, what their experiences are, and understanding of the culture of philanthropy. Like I will tell you now, like in Hispanic households, like for at least growing up, when my dad, once I sort of started working on this career path, my dad was like, people give their money away, like
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
like why? And then sort of had this conversation about how impactful it is. And in the US, we are in this position. I don't know what it's like in some other countries. Other countries, some have free universities, but here we are in this precarious place where whether the schools are public or private, the schools have to rely on fundraising for often large percentages of their operating budget. And so I think the one size fit all approach, as time keeps going on, it's not going to always work. Eventually, you see that decline in the graduate schools, that their fundraising participation is always often much lower than the undergraduate.
Right.
So again, you can talk about this for hours, it's kind of really interesting research field in itself.
Well, there is that academic research side of you coming through here, Jessica.
I think about this stuff a lot sometimes. And again, that's why I think sometimes it doesn't always make a lot of sense just because I jump all over the place. And again, just going back to your first question though, and maybe that's again part of the reason why like what I studied always makes me look at some of these things in this way. And I think it does make me hopefully a good fundraising, because I feel like I have a good understanding sometimes of people's like behaviors and more respect for people's backgrounds, like cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds. And sort of, I think that's some of the stuff, again, sort of relates to the second question that we need to take a look at.
Yeah, so great. So great. Thank you, Jessica. You mentioned just now, like some of the trends and pivots and the times are changing, which I think is a nice segue to the third question. So about a year ago, you were a panelist for the Women in Development Boston session titled Then and Now in Development Hiring, Emerging Trends in Hiring for a More Inclusive Future. I would love to know how you got involved with that panel and what your experience was and takeaway.
So I kind of got pulled in by one of my previous colleagues. Her name is Zena. She is involved in women in development. She actually works really closely with Jessica McNeill. Or like they've been close. I think they've had a bit of a mentor relationship. They've also, I don't know if they both are members, but I know Zena is a member of the group is called Woke. And I think I was a member, I was a member like years ago when I was still when I was at Cal State LA. I was a member for like a year, and unfortunately I just kind of, again, life's gotten busy, but yeah, so I kind of got pulled into the conversation via that connection.
Yes, an alum.
Kind of similar to your question earlier, just they wanted someone with a younger perspective. Again, I think I'm not soul wise, I'm not that young, but so yeah, so sorry, rambling.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how I got pulled into it. And yeah.
Nice. And I think, I'd love to know, any takeaways for you, maybe what you talked about, or, anything that you're seeing with trends and hiring would be interesting to know about.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really interesting. I think one of the one of my takeaways was, and I forget what the school was, it's been a little while, but
Yeah.
the one of the schools, they were talking about their hiring process and sort of how they were going through this sort of blind hiring process where some of that information, like name, ethnical, racial background, like wasn't really sort of like a visible thing, and it was based
Oh,
more on skills and things like that. So they kind of went through their processes, and I thought that was like really interesting
that's
and really
interesting.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me though, like one of the things that was most important for me to point out was that sometimes it's just worth taking a chance on someone who maybe doesn't have that much experience in the field. Like I
Right.
think people can surprise you, and when you talk about like, you want to have like more inclusive and diverse, like, group of people working in a place, it's like you you're not often going to have people from like, from communities of color who might have been afforded the opportunities or experiences to have experience in a
Sure.
field like this. I think,
Great point.
again, and kind of going back to like phonathons are going away. That was such a great, I think, recruitment tool to get people to work in sort
Yes,
of this
I
field.
agree. Yeah.
And especially because you were tapping a pool of students, especially in schools like Cal State LA, where I come from, that's very diverse, like very sort of, it introduces this field of work that otherwise necessarily people don't really know about. It's not something that
Yeah.
you go to school for. And so I think it was important for us to maybe, for me to bring that up and sort of hopefully discuss that a bit,
Yeah.
because I think that it's just, there's not always a lot of doors open for
Yeah.
people of color to move into this field. And
Yeah. That's a solid point. And I think I'm with you on that, going back to the phonathon, like, you know, important to have an on-ramp, an outlet for people of diverse backgrounds who don't have exposure to philanthropy beforehand, to let them know, hey, this is a viable, stable career opportunity. And then just in general, for the nonprofit world, it's gaining exposure to a broad section of the next generation of leaders who will look at our industry with a different perspective, and really valuable experiences. So yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, Jessica. I would love to get to this last question, and it's about envisioning your future. And I just would love to know, what excites you about working in development, and, anything you would, dream about doing in time in this industry, please.
Yeah. I mean, if I can like just like speaking honestly, I think the thing that excites me the most, and this, or at least just what drives me to stay on this career path, is that very fact that like I hope that via one conversation or anything like that that I have that leads to a gift, be it a small gift or a more significant gift, like that means that it's going to be provide an opportunity to open a door for someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what like really resonates with me, because I think that, again, I was afforded the opportunity because someone like me probably had a conversation with someone at some point that led to a scholarship that I got. And so
Sure.
that's kind of what drives me. And
I love that.
goals, yeah. And I mean, goals wise, I think no matter what I do or where I am 5 or 10 years from now, I think whatever career I'm doing, I think that it will always be tied to education in some way.
Yeah.
Whether it's still in higher ed or whether it's working for a nonprofit, that it's doing something in the community that's providing access to education. And there's so many great nonprofits that are trying to do really great things with social impact. Like there's a project that I heard about recently where it's talking about trying to sort of get the arts into like a community, and how exposure to arts and ease of access to it can then lead to interest in wanting to learn more and wanting to be, educated and things like that. And so it's always like what's really fascinating to me. It's like I feel like all paths can lead to education, and I think like education is priceless. It's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a terrific answer. And I think as I listened to you, it's really clear to get a sense for your commitment to education and how it benefits the individual, and then the academic and the professional experience you have all kind of ties together. So that's really exciting. And I appreciate you sharing that all with us today, Jessica.
No, thank you so much, Nick. And I'm not gonna lie, I do have my moments where sometimes I'm like, oh, why am I doing this job? As you know, it's not always easy. But it's fun. I learn a lot, and it's just so rewarding, I think. So
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that perspective with us today. And I'm excited to see your career continue and to stay in touch. So
oh, me too. Thank you.
yeah. This has just been a great interview, Jessica, and I appreciate your time and the preparation today. And for our audience, you'll be able to find Jessica's interview on LinkedIn and YouTube, as well as the audio only portion on Spotify and Podbean, airing in early June of 2024. Right now it's March 13th, so we've got a little bit of time until then, but thank you everyone for your support for this program. And if you'd like to be a guest, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. And Jessica, I wish you all the best and look forward to staying in contact.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you all.